The three prime entities. Inward in the heart inquiring keenly, who am I? The seeker vanishes, and Shiva alone shines clear. When the avid beholder does not exist, it would be madness to say that the world beheld exists. When in this wise both I and world are gone, Shiva as bright awareness shines alone. This flawless truth, the one without a second, how or by whom is it to be known? If, like the Lord, the world and I were real, his wholeness would be flawed. Unless we grant that God could be divided, the world and I can never claim reality. If the glossy Jiva could exist and function on its own, apart from being, the sage's ultimate teaching that the Jiva's actions are all Shiva's would be a concept merely, not authentic truth. When the projector's light is lost, in broad daylight the pictures vanish. Even so, when the mind's bowed light is lost in pure awareness, the false, grand show of Jiva, God in the world, disappears. Though thus reality is one, all schools concede at first three primal entities, God, Jiva, and world, because the outward-looking mind, discursive, cannot straightway face the unity of being. Veiling, the Lord's compassionate grace. The Lord's compassionate grace, it is that dark oblivion hides from view our countless former births, each filled with griefs we suffered and inflicted. The Lord's compassionate grace it is, that dark oblivion hides from view our countless former births, each filled with griefs we suffered and inflicted. Memory of the tales of troubles this present birth has brought on us embitters our whole life and makes forgetfulness a thing to long for. Individuality. Vyakti and Shakti owe their being to the wandering mind's conceptual power, but in the self's reality, beyond the mind's bewildering play, they have not and have never had existence. Ascribing individual being to realize muktas is sheer folly. Their being is universal being. Their separateness seen in that pure sky is but the shadow cast by the separateness of lookers-on still bound. In the hearts of seekers, awareness only stands as true soul being, and attachment to the body is no more. How can we then declare that this one or that one is a peerless seer? Are seers but bodies, and so more than one? You who go round in eager search of this great soul and that great soul to look at, are not all great souls yourself to reach and know and be? So long as one retains a trace of individuality, one is a seeker still, and not a true seer, effort-free, even though one's penance and one's powers may be wonderful indeed. Without self-knowledge which transcends all individuality, vain, vain are wonder-working powers who would seek these maddening gifts, but those who have not known their true identity as self. The seer, consummate, formless, is the sum of all the wonder-workers that are known. His are the many miracles that happen. His Dakshinamurtis, his who stands as witness of them all. Wrong identification. Like one who takes a crocodile for a boat and with its help tries to cross a river, are those who, while they pamper the trivial flesh, claim also that they are earnest seekers of the living self. Give up the thought that this frail body is the self. Pursue the self which is eternal bliss. To seek it while cherishing the perishable body is like trying to cross a river using a crocodile for a raft. Sri Bhagavan. Forgetting being awareness bliss, the self which is too subtle for speech and thought, and toiling hard for the body of flesh is like trudging up and down a tall, steep sweep in order to water some coarse and worthless weed. Those who desire and like and live the trivial life the ego knows reject as if it were unreal the natural life of infinite bliss within their own hearts, ever present for their enjoyment. Those who forget the harm the false world there before us does, and cling to it as real and comfortable, mistake, alas, a floating bear for a boat, only to be crushed and drowned in the sea of births. As one mistakes the goings and comings of the vehicle as his own, the fool, not knowing his true being as the self, suffers the shocks of the Jiva's poor samsara life. When will the fool who thinks the body and the world are permanent and clings to them find peace? Only when this folly leaves him, and he trusts and like a limpet clings to that, the self within, thenceforward he shall never know more pain. Those who enjoy the ego's life of false phenomena perish and die. The state of grace, supreme awareness, the life lived in self-being, this alone is bliss worth seeking. The Pandit. Why do people call me learned? What is the mark of real learning? Learning that all garnered knowledge of things is empty ignorance, and that true knowledge is the search for the knower. He who by questing inward for the knower has destroyed the ego and transcended so-called knowledge abides as the self. He alone is the true knower, not one who has not seen the self and therefore has an ego still. Those who, learning to forget completely all objective knowledge, turn inward firmly and see clearly the truth, abide serene. Those who try to recall forgotten things pine bewildered, fretting over false phenomena. Poor fellow, you who are so proud of your omniscience, when you are questioned, you know all things, do you know who you are? You collapse, disgraced, discomfited. O man of genius, may this your ego mind dry up as dust and perish utterly. When knowledge, marred by doubt and error, disappears in true awareness, clear and pure, one thus established firmly in self-being, free from falsehood, has crossed over to the further shore of the river of knowledge. He who, his ego gone, knows as it is I, the first person, subject substantive, combined with am, the predicate of being, he alone is the true honest knower. The poet. May the poet who might have debased his tongue by uttering praise of mortals feel penitent, resolve henceforth to sing of God's greatness alone, never of a man's vile estate, and live a noble life. If, gaining by the grace of God the gift of poetry, one fails to dedicate it to the Lord, but uses it in praise of men, one makes the goddess poetry a prostitute. True poetry springs only from the calm heart's clarity, which follows the elimination of the ego by inward search and finding out that none of the five sheaths is I. The futility of mere learning. Books of guidance all prescribe freedom from thought as the best way to find freedom. This being the heart of every art, being known of what avail all the arts. When those whose conduct is not godly take up the study of Vedanta and sacred books, they but defile Vedanta, radiant, pure itself. The burden of the learning borne by folk who dally in fleeting flesh does not serve to starve the ego or draw one inward to the heart. Where ever-present grace abides, is not this burden purposeless, like the goat's ever-restless beard? Unless by one means or another, mind dies out and certitude from true self-recognition comes, the knowledge which mere learning brings is like the horse's horn unreal. Of the ever unsteady ego, eddying like the wayward wind, the source, the still heart, is alone the final home of rest. The arts provide but bustling battlefields in between. Those keen and skilled in self-inquiry, who giving up the exhaustive Veda and Aga and Agama books, search inwardly, only they gain clarity and shake off root and branch desire for trivial objects. Though ardently we study works immaculate of radiant wisdom, yet as through meditation we make these gains our own, we must forget and leave behind what once we learnt. Truth of Vedanta. Those who know nothing but sense pleasure, to ruin and destruction doomed, resent transcendence of the senses, and call this fresh and fruitful wisdom dry Vedanta. The experience of Vedanta comes only to those who are utterly without desire. Far, far it is from those who still retain desires. For such the penance is prescribed of longing for the Lord who knows no desire, so as to end forever all desire. The course of prarabdha. What we experience now is only the fruit of former actions. Knowing this, one should not worry what happens to one. Whether or not one likes it, one may not escape. One needs must eat the food one has prepared. Each one eats one's destined food. Shiva as witness shines within. He who knows himself as not the eater, but the witness of self, he is none other than Shiva Supreme. Like the steady shadow lurking at the lamppost, some people's ego darkness tarries while they stay unmoving near the Master of boundless wisdom, and their bodies grow old and die. Such is their fate, their raw and unripe state. The power of prarabdha. How is it that the eightfold siddhis and supreme self-knowledge do not come together when so desired? It is because the world is such that wealth and wisdom stand apart. False jiva and self. To jump about and play vile tricks like a little Satan, to flit from thought to thought, to look and see and suffer much. This is the false jiva's nature. The self's true nature is but to be and shine. Strength of vasanas. Flung back by vasanas, naughty boys, into samsara's eddying stream, some creatures suffer, alas, unable to stand firm on the bank, the self. The ego not. Lapsing from the self-deceit, the being-awareness vast unbroken, a separate I springs up, which falls into the air of confronting a world perceived as something other than the self. Trusting to the body's truth, the false self-blinded egonaut lusts after various allurements, all imaginary, like the blueness of the sky, and thus tightens into hardness. The mind's eye jaundiced by desire, blind to the self from bondage free, mistakes the body as the eye, hides behind the fivefold sheath, and sees the world objectively as something other than the self. The life of folly, lived by the filthy ego which deems the flesh its home, is no true life. It is a dream, a passing fancy seen in the self, auspicious, blissful Shiva supreme. The Jiva false is but a shadow, functioning amid the other shadows that make up the world movie. The ego's strength. When ego ends, then one becomes a devotee true. When ego ends, one becomes a knower too. When ego ends, one becomes being supreme. When ego ends, grace fills all space. Only the hero strong, who has discarded the ego, body-based, is a true ascetic and a true seer. Hard it is for those who still retain regard for asrama or varna to cast off the ego's heavy burden. One who sees otherness and difference cannot become a Brahmin merely by the study of the Vedas 4. Who sees his ego dead and knows the Vedas' import, he alone is truly a Brahmin. Failing in this, one swelters within, fallen, despised. Kannappa, ripe in love, scooped out and in the Lord's face planted his eyes. But till he plucked them and planted them, he too retained a trace of pride in those bright, beautiful orbs of his. Attachment to the body dies hard, very hard indeed. Why did the three-eyed Lord ordain that Kannappa should pluck and plant those eyes of which he was so proud? It was to save him from the death, the deadly folly of deeming he was mere flesh inert. Such is the might of Shiva's grace, of love for him. The ego's dance. Seen aright the primal ruler's dance, his world play comes to this. If ego rises, all things rise. If it subsides, they all subside. The ego life that people lead in the three worlds delusion bound is nothing but the dance of demons, clinging to corpses in the burning ground. Here, right now, is a wonder of wonders. Listen, it is the bustling, hustling zeal in action of folk who cannot even think at all unless they are by omnipresent awareness made to think. Much like the boast of the cripple who said, "Single-handed I would meet this host of enemies, lay them low and rise a pile of corpses here, if only someone first would lift and prop me up." The madcaps who forget that they themselves are by great Shakti moved, and busily gather thaumaturgic powers, are like the cripple who claimed, "If someone would but lift me up, I would scatter these foes, I would." Sri Bhagavan. If even the wind god could not stir, alas, the flimsiest wisp of straw, nor the fire god burn it, how can one, with one's own separate ego strength, do anything at all? With knowledge by illusion veiled, staggering under a load of sin, blind and unseeing the supreme, the egos play their comic role like figures on the temple tower. Sensible passengers do not carry their luggage on their own poor heads in a fast train, hauling under steam power heaviest loads like wisp of straw. Even so, because the power supreme does as it must sustain all things, men should leave their burdens of care on that awareness and feel free. In meditation deep, While yet a trace of ego lingers, fear and trembling may sometimes occur. But when the ego dies at last in pure awareness, quaking stops. Stillness alone prevails. When the ever-restless fiend mind, freed at last from fond illusion, merges in pure awareness as a waveless sea, the ego subsides, restoring one to health and wholeness. To shed the ignorant ego's fond illusions, and to realize that we do nothing and all deeds are his, this death of the villainous sense of doership is true strength, the power that springs from penance pure. Treachery to the self. Traitors to the self are those deluded fools who do not see that all these worlds and creatures seeming so many and various are the self alone, held and beheld within its own ethereal space of pure awareness. Heaven and hell. Please don't debate, good folk, whether heaven and hell exists. As much as this our world exists, so long, so much they too exist. If scholars with their minds, made up that these our bodies and world exist, would join us in the quest, we shall assert that heaven and hell exist no less. Terror of hell. In fear of hell they tremble, who know not that hell is the ego's fault. Those who know what causes hell have found the way to the heaven of truth. Victory over Naraka. Narayana slew Naraka. They say, who acts as if this wretched body were himself is Naraka. Whoever questioning whence this demon rises, slays him is Narayana himself. The ceremonial bathing done during Deepavali celebrates the victory over the demon Naraka, seeking out his dwelling place and slaying him there. One bathes oneself in the pure waters of awareness. The demon Naraka, who rules hell with the notion, body is I. Where is this demon? Inquiring thus with the disgust of jnana, Narayana destroys the demon, and this day is Narayaka Chaturdasi, Sri Bhagavan. Searching out and slaying Naraka, who wallowed in the putrid body of flesh as I, and the resulting dawn eternal of the self, this is the festival of light, Deepavali. Turning inward. Even the knowledge sense perceived of the world without has for its ground the self above. To search for knowledge somewhere else, apart from that, is but to grasp the shadow, not the substance. How to make the mind, which now looks painfully at forms and features there without, turn inward, by asking who this I, this mind is which sees this trivial world, and thus directing it towards the self. Poor seer who suffers endlessly because you still perceive the object, not the subject. Please, look inward, not without, and taste the bliss of non-duality. O heart of mine, it is not wise to stay out. Safe it is to stay within. Conceal yourself from Maya, which plans to draw you out to destroy you. Stay within. Running out in search of wonders and dancing there with pleasure, do not perish. Better with the light of grace look within, and find certitude in being and abiding as your true self. The notion of duality brings pain and mars the peace of everyone. It is wise and proper, then, to control the play of mind and save it from this notion's hold. The pilgrims who, without discovering what is within, Proceed from place to place, ever hovering bird-like? No, Shiva Supreme is but awareness, absolutely still, abiding, centered in the heart. Not like a boat sail wide outspread and worn away by wind and weather, but like the humble anchor sunk in the vast ocean's depth, the mind should plunge and settle in the heart of wisdom. For the man of Dharma seeking experience of the state supreme, the heroic action needed is to draw in the outward darting mind and fix it firmly in the heart. If the mind, turned outward and distracted, starts observing its own being, alienation ends. The vestige ego merges in the light of true awareness shining in the heart. The kingdom of God. Because we think we are the body, we imagine that heaven exists somewhere afar. The pure, bright world of Shiva is not a place to go to. Nowhere but in your heart alone it is. Providing space for that bright world of Shiva and lighting up its marvels, you alone are the self-luminous perfect being. To know it, know yourself. Within you is the kingdom of the Lord. The light of being, bliss infinite, transcendent, vast, bright, seeming new, that wells up in devotees' hearts when still, serene, intense. This is Shiva's heaven so dear, so rare. Shavahood. When the distracted and bewildered ego mind and the last trace of difference having ended, life becomes a natural state of perfect purity and peace. One lives in Shiva as Shiva himself. When the alienating ego ends and merges in the heart's awareness, all false concepts disappear. What is known as Shivahood is the supreme state, pure awareness. All-pervading, all-transcending, subtle, auspicious, and eternal is God. When the once wandering mind, merging in its own source, is cleansed, corrected, and made clear, this state of pure awareness is Shivahood. They say that Hara gives to Jivas knowledge, while Hari gives them heavenly bliss. But since firm awareness is both God and heaven, Hari and Hara are one and the same. Shakti and Shiva. The self, the whole soul source of Shakti supreme, the power of thought, that self, the primal being, the heart alone, is Shiva pure, the dweller in Tile. The bliss supreme, on tasting which the mind will cease from further search, the heart from which a copious spring of ever-fresh experience flows, this heart of bliss eternally chanting, this is Shiva. His mind is for the devotee, the coward maiden, with true love intoxicated, the heart which kills the ego as the bright red flame draws and destroys the moth, is Krishna, Lord of the gopis. Know well that perfect selfhood, peace serene, all thought in stillness lost, identity with being awareness, this alone is pure Shiva Puja. Beyond his destined span of years, Markanda lived, defying death. Worship of Shiva, the death of death, wears out and snaps the strands of time. What is Shiva worship? Seeing his bright presence in the elements 5, sun, moon, and every living being, prompt response and service apt to these amount to Shiva worship, excellent and ever fresh. When the imperfect Jiva bows his pride head at the feet of God, it means the overcoming of I, the individual self, by Shiva awareness. You do not feel the secret melting power of image worship and so condemn it. Why then do you cherish this flawed, crawling body, mistaking it for you? sacred ashes. When the ego faults with ancient memories, laden is burnt up in the fire of pure awareness. The remnant ashes manifest mere being, true form of the Supreme. The King of Grace, the Sovereign Seer, assumes the Guru's form and kindles through his unspoken word the fire of pure awareness, which calcines in the heart's crucible the cow dung of the covering self to ashes, his great gift, the ultimate bliss. Those who on their bodies wear such vibhuti are the noblest in the wide world, for this vibhuti, this wondrous thought-free pure awareness, is the sole infinite true being. Those who desire and strive for this vibhuti are themselves transformed into such being. Take it then, vibhutis, the ego's death and the attainment of self-being as awareness. The red auspicious mark adorning a woman's forehead signifies the flame of knowledge which consumes heaven, earth, and the nether world, as the inert ego, introverted, turned towards the self and burns. Riding the bull. 'Tis said that Shiva, for his service, chose the bull and other creatures. This is to give us step by step the basic attitude that all forms we see are forms of God. Shakti and Shanti. There is no deed too hard for soul force to accomplish. The soul force is the power of love divine. To say that numbers of weapons can do what soul force cannot is but the folly of reliance on the body vile. The truth they know not who assert that power and peace are different things. What abides as peace within appears to outward sight as power. Sri Bhagavan, what to inward sight is peace appears as power to outward sight, for those who truly know the two are one and the same. The seeker, strict in discipline, gains diverse powers of punishment, but perfect meekness is the mark of the master of awareness true. Macro and micro. When the opposite poles of two magnets, one huge, the other tiny, come together, the small acquires and shares the power and nature of the large. The seeker, strict in discipline, gains diverse powers of punishment, but perfect meekness is the mark of the master of awareness true. Macro and micro. When the opposite poles of two magnets, one huge, the other tiny, come together, the small acquires and shares the power and nature of the larger. Desire for thaumaturgic powers, siddhis. From him who offers all, the whole self, why ask for some few silly siddhis? From a generous patron, why beg for some old, stale gruel? Who, having reached the sage's feet, that world of infinite awareness, would pray for siddhis? In high heaven, where nectar flows in plenty, who would ask for old, sour gruel? All siddhis flock together and come to those who are aflame with God-love, but then their minds, absorbed like food in God's own feet, have no desire for siddhis. If a seeker after moksha sets his mind on miscellaneous siddhis, bondage tightens as the roots of ego swell in size and strength. From Sri Bhagavan, peace of mind is moksha ever present. Siddhis arise from movements of the mind. How can those who hanker after siddhis know moksha's bliss, the stillness of the mind? That you, the self, ethereal being, pure awareness, should become a body with hands and feet, and deeming it eternal should dance about, this indeed and nothing else is the great miracle. Mukti splendor. The attainment of our true being as awareness. This is the real so-called siddhi attainment. So-called siddhis, eightfold powers, miraculous. all belong to the bewildered realm conceptual of foolish minds. True immortality. Unfailing immortality accrues only to those who have destroyed the ego, whose demon dance obstructs the vision of the precious truth that we are ever perfect being, awareness, bliss. Imagining that this newcomer, the body, is oneself, one thinks that one is born and that one dies. The moment this delusion goes, one's own true immortality is gained. Death is nothing but the fond delusion that this newcomer, the body, is oneself. When the ego, the clinging to delusion ends, the ensuing bliss of true awareness being one with a second this only is immortality. Believing that the body is oneself, one dreads the body's death, inquiring, what dies? Who am I? One dies into the self. How else? But through the ego's death can one gain immortality. True clearness, freedom from the mind's ripples and shadows. This alone is ever-fresh immortality. By this awareness pure, by this alone, and by no other means, can death, a mere illusion, end. Elixir for immortality. Only by courtesy is the body vulnerable and born to die, called an entity substantial. The sole reality, the only thing permanent and ultimate, is self-awareness. That alone is self-awareness, that alone. When the ego irrepressible returns at last to its own source and merges in it, the self-awareness shining clear, distilled and pure, is the elixir true, assuring health and wholeness, ever enduring. Body preservation. The body is the prime original malady, the mother of all other maladies. To labor hard for body's permanence is wasting water on desert sand, or welcoming and cherishing, not dreading, a disease. Loving the false, venomous ego, the source of every dire disease. Fools for their body's preservation perform untiring tapas as if one should take medicines to aggravate an ailment. Instead of resting in consummate mauna won by tapas pure, to strive to stabilize the body is impensate, folly, like longing and struggling hard to pile up poverty. For minds enlightened and mature, this life of ours is false, conceptual. Prolonging it seems meaningless and without purpose. Of non-attachment, O hero stern, intent on tapas, do the world's praise and worship its eager prayers for your favors. Please your heart. Know that these are but Maya's golden baits spread out to entangle you. Some fortunate through former deeds naturally disdain the pleasures of this world and the next. To these alone does true awareness come with ease. Knowing well that bliss serene is found in being the self alone, and not in this illusory life, seek and attain the final heaven of grace, the state of Muna, pure awareness. Forsake me not, my friend, detachment. Ever let me call you mine. For you destroy the densest darkness, the darkness of desires, kindling the flame of knowledge. Friendship even with the fiend one cannot end, and you, my friend, detachment, ever you ward off evil from me, and keep me bound to enduring truth. Such is your virtue. Estrangement from you would be worse than all the world's hostility. Whatever notion may arise, never to let live or grow, but to turn it that very instant, firm and stern, back to its source and merge it there, this is robust, intense detachment. From the mind's fortress held by foes, innumerable memories one by one they issue. With the wonder weapon of self-inquiry, slay each thought as it comes out in the open, till at last you have retrieved the citadel of your own heart. Awareness is detachment. Awareness, clear and pure, is nothing but seeing the world as nothing other than the perceiver. Mind indrawn and planted in the heart, deeming this world as a mere seeming, not an object, is detachment. Mind's puissance, even as a piece of glass acquires redness from the red flower near it, chit, awareness pure, becomes chitta, the mind, by imposition of sense impressions. Remove this ta, and the chitta becomes chit again, awareness pure. This ta then stands for maya, mere illusion. Inner purity. The world's bright objects manifold please only to bring grievous evil. Unlike these, inner purity alone has beauty true, and hence the wise regard and marvel at the sage, the living embodiment of truth, as God made manifest here on this earth. Seeing outward beauty and not inner leads but to ruin dire. It is like the moth desiring the bright flame, or like the cobra mating with the viper. Of death. What else is death but straying from the perfect state of being the self, immortal, home of love eternal and bliss supreme, the heaven of true awareness. Through the Guru's grace by service earned, learn why we are born and why we suffer. Alienation is the cause. Cling firmly to the self, abide there, and ennoble your life. Locus of life. Because the heart from falsehood free is the Jiva's true home, there too dwell the vasanas. If these keep burning in the brain, not in the heart, then they must die too, must they not, when the brain dies? Since both the serpent flame ascending and the nectar stream downflowing seek but the heart, this is the fount of nectar from the mind divine, and the fierce serpent's maddening power. In whichever chakra one believes the self is present, there seems to be. Such is the power of thought. But the soul center, where the I arises and subsides, is only the heart which we extol. Whoso ignores the heart, the home of every mode of being, and thinks the I is seated in some other center, merges in that center for a while, but misses true self-knowledge, bliss eternal.